All right. Had a little bit of a slow start today. I wasn't streaming to YouTube for a bit. That's okay though. Easy tech support. So yeah, today I'm painting this Praetor-Prime model that comes with the Stormbringer subscription. It's pretty cool. It's an alternative sculpt, so I think this is the only place where you can get it. But yeah, and so today I started off by like already painting a good portion of the model, just getting all the base coats down basically. Yeah, just a little bit. Have to run tech support on my own stream. So I'm also going to be doing some of the base because I haven't really shown any basing, but it's pretty fun. And I'm starting with it because it does take a bit for like the glue to dry. So just so that we're not waiting for glue to dry. Yeah, doing bases is pretty easy. You just gotta kind of slap stuff on the base, and generally the more the merrier. And because it's just like rocks, you can really just like grab this from outside. Just make sure you put it in the oven for a bit. I think it's like 450 for half an hour. That's what you're supposed to do. just get it nice and toasty. Don't want any raw sand. Cool. As for actually painting the model, I'm going to start by painting the face because, let's see, how close can we get it to the screen? There we go. Skin's always interesting because you generally have to get it to be very smooth transitions between your colors for it to look realistic. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So I have a couple of colors here. I have a darker skin color, a lighter skin color, and then an almost white skin color. And we're just going to be blending between these three colors. So I've already applied this first color here as the base coat, and the way you blend the colors, you just kind of drag them in to the middle, mix them up, and then we'll do the same thing over here. Cool. Now we'll put the palette off screen because sometimes the camera likes to focus on that instead of the model. It's like obviously the wet palette's more interesting. I'm also adding water to the paint just to thin it down a bit. Makes the transitions a little bit less harsh. And sometimes when you're adding really thin layers like this, it can be hard to immediately tell the difference that you made, but you just gotta trust the process. It's kind of disappointing that this is the only skin on the model. The rest of it's just kind of hidden behind the armor, but it's fun to every once in a while get to paint a little bit of skin. I actually might not even go up to the brightest color because it's actually getting to be pretty bright pretty quick. So I might just stop halfway and leave it at that. Don't want it to get too bright and then it looks like the face is glowing in comparison to the rest of the model. So the reason that we start so dark and then are building up to this lighter color is just to add depth to the skin, make it a little bit more interesting. And actually, I think I'm gonna come and glaze it down because it is getting very bright. So I have this like a flesh tone contrast paint that I'm gonna be adding to my palette and diluting just to tone down some of these brighter colors and smooth out the transitions. So that's looking a bit better. Definitely a lot less jarring. I do still have to paint the eyes. I think I'll do that really quickly because they look really weird just being pure white. I think I'm going to add a little bit of black, like a little pupil to the center, and that should make it look less jarring. One thing that's important to note about doing eyes is that you don't want to use pure white on the eyes because generally eyes are some form of off-white. And so actually if you use pure white, it'll look like alien and super weird to look at. Alright, there we go. Now they've got some pupils. Starting to look like a person. Although I did the one on this right eye pretty bad. That's okay. Next I can add some definition to the hair. When you're highlighting black, generally you just want to use gray and highlight up. You don't want to add too many highlights because, well, then it starts to look like gray instead of black. We don't want that. We want black hair, not gray hair. This is an immortal celestial warrior, not a human being affected by graying hairs. So the way you tend to highlight black so that it doesn't look like gray is you do very small highlights and you do very fast transitions all the way up to very bright colors. Okay. And then as with everything, once we're done highlighting, generally glaze it back down a little bit. So we'll thin out some black and apply it over, just so that we smooth out the transitions and maintain the original color of the area. Cool. So now we've gotten the face and the hair done, and I can move on to like the red. Painting ghosts better. I don't know about if painting ghosts is better. It is fun to paint ghosts because you can get some really cool like gradients on the ghost that make it look really ghosty, for lack of a better term. Lots of greens and blues. But yeah, you'll see I'm moving through a lot of these steps pretty quickly, and that's because as you start highlighting brighter and brighter, you're painting a lot less of the model, so it goes pretty quickly, especially in comparison to like base coating, which is why I base coated off camera. Because it is pretty time consuming and isn't really all that exciting to watch. After I finish highlighting this red, I'm going to go back to the base really quick, because I think the glue I set up is dry at this point. So I don't have to go in and prime that part of the base. So here's where we were at last time we left off the base. The glue's kind of dried, but you can see I can still knock off some of the rocks. Covering it in a primer helps because it kind of locks down the area. That's another one of the benefits of having like a bottle of primer like this. I can kind of I can just slap it onto the paintbrush as opposed to needing like a rattle can and spraying it on. It's kind of convenient sometimes to just be able to slap it on with a paintbrush. And I definitely didn't get enough on my palette, but that's okay. I'm also going to be adding some texture paint later. This is basically just paint with rocks in it. And so, if my camera will focus on it, cool. Hello? Alright, cool. Yeah, it's basically just paint with rocks in it. And so I'm gonna glue the model on and then apply it, just so that the model lays flat on the base. And I can kind of pile the rocks around the model's feet. It'll give it a little bit of extra, it'll make it look like they belong there. Like they're actually in the environment, stepping on the dirt. As opposed to a fake model on a fake base. Alright, and we'll set that aside to dry again. We'll keep going on the model. Cool, so I've done the kind of the face, the hair, and some of the red. So now I'm going to start on the cloak. And similar to skin, you want the cloak to be very... you want the blending to be very smooth, as fabric is soft, and so the highlights on fabric are generally quite smooth. When I base coated the cloth, I mixed some purple into the blue, and so I'm gonna do the same here on my palette. I got a little bit of purple paint, and I'm just going to take some blue, set it to the side, take some purple, mix it in. The purple is very vibrant, so you don't need a lot. You can see it instantly turned my blue into a purple instead. So we just want a slight purple tint. We don't want we don't want it to be purple. So then you're just gonna make nice long strokes on the model. You can also make sure you can do what's called feathering, which is where you rinse off your brush and draw the brush along the transition between the highlight you just placed and the previous color. And this will make the transition a bit less harsh. For some reason, I'm very bad at getting paint onto my palette. I always underestimate the amount of paint that I'll need. And I'm just painting all the raised edges and folds in the cloak. This'll make the edges and folds stand out more, while leaving the deeper purple color in the recesses. And it adds more interest to the cloak. I'll be bringing in a brighter blue and just mixing it into the previous mix. That is pretty bright. I'm just going to feather away some of the edges. then lastly, I'm just going to come in with just the brightest color. A very small amount. Alright, and then the final step, as per usual, I'm just going to recreate the base color. But very thin, and apply it to the whole cape. As a glaze. I think I'm going to have to come back in and glaze down some of these other transitions a little bit more, but I'm going to have to wait for that to dry to do that. So I'm going to move on for the time being, and I'm going to be working next on all the gold armor. Actually, you know what, the base is dry, so I think at this point I'm going to detach the model and attach them to the base, just so that I can keep working on the base, and we can get this done today. So the steps for attaching it to the base, you just kind of detach it from the holder, shave off the paint that's on the bottom of the feet. This is just so that the plastic glue adheres better. And then you just slap it on. Nothing too fancy. Well, I do have to be careful not to touch the cape, because that's drying. Ah. Cool. So I'm just gonna hold like this for a bit. If you noticed, I did put a little like gecko on the base. I got these like little, I don't know, lizards from like an Etsy shop. Someone with a really good 3D printer was selling them. And I have to say, I very much enjoy the little lizards that I can put on my bases. They're pretty fun. And pretty exciting to add. That glue was not enough. Alright, so I went ahead and added a couple more layers of the darker paint just to smooth out the transitions between the various blues. And you can see with each kind of layer of the thinned down paint, the transitions become smoother and smoother. Alright. Our model has been pretty securely attached to the base now too, which is great. Can continue on applying paint to the base. And so I'm going to take this texture paint, which like I said is just painted rocks. Make sure you don't use your detail brush when you do this, because these, like, it does like literally have rocks in it. So you really don't want to get that in your nice brushes. Yeah. This is a really old, crappy brush that I keep around just for applying texture paint and mixing up various paints too. And this is the reason I didn't apply like the sand to the whole base, because you don't need to. You basically apply the sand to places where you want them to stand out, be a bit higher than the rest of the base. You want to build like verticality. The rest of the base you can just cover with like a texture paint, to fill in the gaps so that there's something going on. It's not just the plain base. And then you can see the sand we applied earlier is a bit higher than the stuff from the texture paint, and so it stands out a bit more. If you get any on the feet, you can just rinse off your brush and wipe it off. But in general, if it gets on the very bottom of the feet, don't worry about it, because it'll just add to the look. It'll make it look like the model's stepping in the dirt, which is the goal. Alright, cool. So we've applied a texture paint to the rest of the base. We have to let that dry before we can do anything else there. And I can move on to the gold armor. So I've already applied the base gold color, and I applied a shade. So now I'm just going to be coming back in with the base gold color to re-highlight some of the areas that got dulled down a bit. Mostly we're just looking at edges and raised areas as per the usual. Now, I probably should have waited to do the base until I was a lot more done with the model, but I want to show the basing process, and if I waited until I was done, I wouldn't be able to show you. So, do the base first. And just kind of deal with the fact that some things are a little bit harder to paint now, a little bit harder to reach with the brush than before. That's okay. A lot of the stuff that is now harder to reach with the brush, you don't really need to highlight because it's usually covered by another part of the model. So it's in shadow anyway. No need to worry about highlighting that up because it would not normally be highlighted in real life. I also realized I forgot to paint some of the leather straps. So we're just gonna slap some Rhinox hide on that for now to get that base coated. There's so few like leather straps that it's easy to forget about them. Okay. There's also a little bit of the belt showing. All right. Mission accomplished. Additionally, there were a couple details that I left that are supposed to be gold that I left not gold, and that's because they're like on top of another part of the model, like this little insignia on the scabbard, and then there's a section that's supposed to be white that I painted gold for a similar reason. I did not do that yet, so I'm just gonna base coat those parts now. A lot of times it makes it easier just to finish the portion underneath and then paint the small details later. So that you don't have to keep like touching up the small detail on top of the model that you keep hitting because you're painting around it. So now I'm painting the storm-kissed halberd. If you ask me why or how a storm kisses a halberd, I got nothing for you. Kind of just sounds like it got struck by lightning, which is pretty cool. And obviously makes it more powerful. Alright, and we're going to continue highlighting the gold. If you're wondering how to highlight gold, you can either use these lighter gold layer paints, or you can just mix silver into the gold base color. That's essentially what these lighter gold base paints are. So if you're on a budget or just don't want to buy more paints, as long as you have a bright silver, you can just mix varying amounts of silver into the gold, and that'll give you your highlight colors. See you later, Clay. Thanks for stopping by. In addition to highlighting, you can do what's called recess shading, which is actually the exact opposite. And it tends to have an interesting effect, and can really push the contrast between your shadows and highlights. It's a nice technique to kind of shake things up a bit and continue to add interest to your model. Additionally, you can shade parts of the model that are in shadow just a little bit more than the rest of the model to give it a more realistic look. In general, the bottom half of the miniature will be darker than, or should be darker than, like the top half, just because of light. So if you apply more shade to the bottom half of the model, it tends to look a bit more realistic. Oof. Looks like I got a little bit of gold on the blue cloak. That hurts. I'll have to whip up some of the blue base coat paint really quickly to fix that. It's a bigger deal when you don't catch it right away, because when you catch it right away you can generally fix it, but if it's been sitting there for a little bit and it's like dried and set, you just kind of have to come back in and go over it, which is tough. All right. Additionally, it looks like our the texture paint that we put on the base is dry, which is awesome. You can go ahead and do a bit more there. So the way I like to start off is just by applying like a dark brown contrast paint over it. It kind of gives everything the same general feel. It's like even like all the rocks and stuff. And then you can paint brown highlights on over the brown, and it gives an interesting look. In general, rocks aren't just like gray. There's a lot of different colors that you can find in rocks, so by starting with the brown and introducing gray highlights, it adds some interest, makes them look a bit more realistic. And as per the usual, I did not get enough paint on the palette. Additionally, I will be adding like some grass tufts and stuff, some flowers too, to the base, just to give it a bit more interest. But we'll do that after we're done, or after I'm done, kind of painting the base. So you don't really paint those; they just kind of sit on top. And you can see that even though the texture paint and like the primed sand that I put on the model, even though those started as different colors, they now just look the same. And that's the benefit of using like a really dark brown contrast paint over them, is you don't have to worry about like base coating them. It just brings everything to the same starting point. Now if I wanted to keep some of that differentiation in color, I could have diluted the contrast paint a little bit, but I don't, so I didn't. Alright, just like one little bit here, and then we'll be done. And we can go back to waiting for paint to dry. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to painting this halberd. Was it Storm-Kissed Halberd? Cool. Can also come in with some Nuln Oil onto this little insignia, just to pick out some of the details. Let's see, what else are we doing here? Oh. We can paint the, we can apply some paint to the, I don't know, flowing scrolls that are coming off the model. And to do that, I'm gonna do some light dry brushing. With just generally a smaller dry brush. So you get your dampening pad nice and damp. And then I'm gonna pull out this bone color. This is the color that I used for the base coat. And you just want to saturate the dry brush and then get most of it off, so that when you apply it, can't really see it on my hand, it only applies to the raised edges of the model. And you just want to apply it in a nice circular motion. You shouldn't see a lot of difference because we are just going over with the base color again. But now we'll switch to brighter colors, and you'll start to see more of a difference. But you have to do that like intermediate step where you come back in with the base coat, just so that your transitions stay nice and smooth. I need to clean out this dry brush. So giving me some issues. Is this one gonna be any better? We'll find out. Yeah, this one will work better. All right. So there you should see the effect coming through. Just adding a nice highlight to the kind of the scrolls. And it takes, and as you can see, it takes roughly 2 seconds to apply. It looks pretty good. All right. Can go back to painting this insignia. Pretty small detail. We're just coming back in with the base color. When the details are very small like this, it's very important that you don't get any paint in the recesses. Because otherwise you lose a lot of definition really quickly. Yeah, just because there's not a lot of difference in between the raised areas and the recesses. Should I add some white? Maybe. Ooh. Yeah, not that one. Forgot I got a new white. Let's see if I can find it. I've got a I've got a pretty big project going on, and so My painting area is kind of a mess right now. Generally, you should be pretty cautious about adding pure white because once you add pure white, there's nowhere to go. So it makes it hard to highlight things or draw someone's attention to a different part of the model because your eyes are generally drawn to the brightest parts of the model. Alright, there you go. So we didn't do pure white, but we did a little bit brighter. Is the base dry yet? Not really. Okay. The gecko, I'm actually going to come back in and touch the gecko up a little bit. And then I'm going to slap a contrast paint on him. Just because I think that's the easiest way to paint him. And generally, for stuff on the base, I tend to spend less time on it. Because stuff on the base should add to the interest of the model, not detract from the interest of the model. And so if you make the base too interesting, it takes away from the model itself, which is not what you want. So the halberd's dry, which means it's time to shade it. I'm just going to slap some Nuln Oil on it. Additionally, if you draw your brush downward on the model, it'll apply more of the shade to the bottom, which is where it should be, towards the bottom edge of the blade. It's kind of an easy first step to highlighting. Let's see, what else can I do right now while I'm waiting for the base to dry? Not a lot. I was kind of cooking on this model. I guess I did a lot more pre-work than I thought. I'll take this time to drink some water. All right. I can start on the rock. So instead of just doing a pure gray on the rock, I start with a gray mixed with some brown, because it's already been base coated with brown. If you go straight to gray, it doesn't look good. It's too jarring. So you start with like a mixture between the brown and gray, just to start off. And you generally, for this whole thing, want to focus your efforts on raised edges and parts of the rock that are like the highest points of the rock. The stuff that's closer to the ground will naturally be more brown because there's like, it's right next to the dirt. There's some dirt on it. So leaving that brown is fine. Alright, then we can come in with some pure gray here. And then I can start mixing lighter grays in. And now instead of focusing on raised areas and such, I'm just doing edges. This helps pick out some of the interesting shapes of the rocks. And it starts to make it look like a rock instead of just like a, I don't know, a gray slab. Again, I'm not going to highlight it too bright because this is just on the base. No need to go too crazy. We don't want it to detract from the model. Pull attention away from the model. We just want it to like accent the work we did on the model. Now for the gecko, I think I'm gonna make him green. See how this like very vibrant green looks. I might need to pick a darker one here. Hopefully this looks good. Oh yeah. Now we're cooking. God, it's still focused on that paint pot, huh? There we go. Alright. Now I'm going to come in with some various lighter browns to pick out some of the texture on the base. And I'm just going to be doing some overbrushing, which is kind of like dry brushing, but just a little bit less extreme. A little bit faster to set up, and I can do some stippling as well. To not only hit the raised edges, but also apply some sporadic color to the ground. I'm also going to come in with some scrag brown, which is kind of a burnt orange. Alright, so now that we've got most of this painted, I'm going to come in with some grass tufts and such, and the flowers, and just place them sporadically around the base. You can use these to like cover up anything that looks weird, any mistakes you made. Bases are generally pretty forgiving because of that. You can also add some little pops of color. I like to use like Gamer's Grass brand stuff because it's generally pretty cheap and it looks really good. So for the amount you're spending, it's a really good deal. And there is a little bit of an adhesive at the bottom of the grass and such, but I like to use super glue as well because I don't trust that. You'll also see me using tweezers. It's helpful for placing the grass tufts and such into areas that are harder to reach. And you just want to place these sporadically around the model. This is something where the more you put down, the better it looks. Obviously to a point, but yeah, it looks better when there's more on the base, when there's less like I don't want to say dead space, but you know, while the texture paint makes it like acceptable, because it's not just the base, but it's still not interesting. And so the less dead space you have on the base, kind of the more interesting it is. So just to show you what I did, kind of where I, come on. It's like, hey, that piece of paper towel is really interesting. So I had this rock with the lizard on it. I thought it looked a little bit awkward, so I placed a grass tuft and some flowers next to it. And I did this same thing where I placed a grass tuft near his foot, just to make it look a little more, make the model look a little more integrated into the base. And then I placed a small grass tuft over here because, well, there wasn't much going on. So I think I'm gonna add I don't know what to do about this like lizard. I don't think it looks good. What's the lizard's name? Oh, should I come up with a name? It doesn't currently have a name. What's do you have a suggestion? Lizzie? Classic. That is a good one. I like that. My goodness. Lizzie the lizard. Let's see. So it's a pretty vibrant green right now. I'm gonna try applying a little bit of a brownish green to the top of the lizard, just to make it, I don't know, look a bit more natural. It's not working out too well. I'm also gonna try some overbrushing, just to catch like the raised bumps and such. One thing about these like little resin creatures that you can pick up is generally not as high of a quality as like other Games Workshop stuff. So sometimes it can be harder to paint them, but that's okay. It's worth it for Lizzie, you know. Now that I've toned down the green, I can kind of layer up with yeah. I like the addition of little critters as well. They are it adds a little bit more excitement to the model. Does the banner say something? Oof. I don't have an answer for you. It doesn't say anything in a language that I know. So if that helps. Sorry. Probably not a very good answer. But Games Workshop likes to kind of make their own languages and alphabets and stuff, and I can't keep up with all of them. Yeah. There's also like some letters like hanging off their belt. I don't know. I got nothing. It might say something cool though, so might be worth a Google search. Let's see if we can continue to highlight this lizard a bit more, because I like the lizard, but I don't like how it looks at the moment. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with it. I think it's just that I haven't like none of the details are very well defined, and so it's kind of hard to tell that it's a lizard. So I'm just going to take my detail brush and a brighter green color and start to highlight and pick out some of the key details. Like, it has this nice texture on the back that I just haven't been successful in picking it out. Additionally, I don't think the shadows are dark enough, which is another reason, another reason why there's not enough contrast on the on the lizard, so it's hard to tell and pick out some of the details. So after I'm done highlighting this up, I'm going to hit it with a shade just to see if I can push the shadows a bit darker. Yeah, I do end up getting paint everywhere, and surprisingly, I have not ended up getting paint all over my watch. I do get paint on the ring all the time, but it just comes off. Acrylic paint isn't too hard to get off. You just gotta rub at it with like your fingernail, and it'll kind of scratch off. That's one of the reasons why I have like these varnishes here. You apply like the gloss varnish first, and then a layer of matte varnish, just to protect your paint, because it comes off pretty easily. So especially if you're touching it, moving it around, there's a game. If you're using it in the game, you can rub off the paint pretty easily. So as for the shade, I'm going to apply, I think, a brown will work well, because I've been working with greens and greenish browns. I used purple flowers. I wish I had some blue flowers, because I think that would look better with the blue cloak. Sadly, I do not own blue flowers. Should have thought ahead and grabbed some, but I think the purple works fine. I'm actually just gonna slap this on the rock as well to bring back some of the brown colors in the rock. Cool. So I think the lizard's starting to look a lot better. I think the last thing I'll do is try and paint the eyes on the lizard. Let me see if I can find a good color. Like, do I just paint them red? Maybe. Maybe. Little splash of red, because we've already used, we already have red on the model as like an accent color. A little more red into the base to kind of tie things together. Continue with colors we already have on the model in our paint scheme. And it also helps define it as a living creature, because it has eyes, instead of the dirt and grass that we already have on the model. So I started off with a very dark red. And then I'll apply a small dot of a bright red. And maybe I'll apply some black. We'll see. The eyes are pretty small, so there's not a whole lot you can do with them, no matter how good you are at painting. We can try. And I think the last step I'm gonna do on Lizzie here is I'm gonna come back in with the brightest color that I was using to highlight him, just to bring back some of the definition. So I said before that I wasn't going to spend a lot of time painting the base, and then I spent a lot of time on this lizard, and that's because the lizard's awesome, and so need to spend a lot of time on the lizard to make him look real good. Can't be having a lame lizard on your base. It's got to be a cool one. All right. Yes, the brown shade was Agrax Earth shade. There's a couple shades that are like really nice. To the point of they're kind of magic. Agrax Earthshade is one of them, and so is Nuln Oil. These are both something that you can kind of just slap on, and it just makes things look better. Another good one is Reichland Flesh Shade. Those three are the main three that I use, and those kind of cover most things. Like Nuln Oil is black, Agrax Earthshade is like a dark brown, and Reichland Flesh Shade is well, it's a flesh shade, so it's a bit warmer. There's like some more red added to it. So I use the Reichland Flesh Shade for, well, skin and for gold. Like all the gold has been, yeah, I used to mix stains. Yeah, so they did used to, yeah, stains used to be the way to go. But yeah, they're hard to control, and it's hard to get the right dilution on them. It's super nice that these come they're the right dilution. They work really well, and they just look nice. They dry matte, like they have a matte finish, and that looks nice. So it's a good product for sure. I think the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna highlight the halberd a little bit. So I'm gonna come in with a brighter silver color. And just hit the edges of the halberd. I am talking to people on YouTube as well, yeah. I try to repeat part of their question so that other people know what I'm talking about, but yeah. I have both chats up. Just I couldn't decide which one to stream to, so I decided to stream to both. Not sure if that's the best. I'm not sure if that's the best decision, but we'll see. Yeah, metallics can go really easy. Basically, you just slap on the base coat, apply the shade. In this case, I used Nuln Oil. And then you just hit the edges with a brighter highlight color. And it tends to look really good. I'm gonna do like one additional step, but yeah, metallics tend to be pretty easy to knock out and are generally pretty low effort. So I'm gonna try and add a little bit of interest to the halberd. So I diluted the silver paint a lot, and I'm just gonna draw it up the top half of the blade, and then I'm going to rinse my brush off and do some feathering to kind of bring that, make the transition a little bit softer. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. How do I pick which models to buy and paint? Mostly I just pick what I think is cool. In this case, I chose, so these are models from, it's called the Stormbringer Magazine. And basically they just, every month they send you a box with a bunch of models in it that you can paint. I did that because I like painting models, and sometimes it gets boring painting models from the same army, and so this one gives me a bunch of different models that I can paint, and they're all just like a little bit different. So that there I'm just not choosing which models to paint. Other than that, yeah, it's personal preference. I have a large collection of Sylvaneth models, which, if you're not familiar, they're like tree people, trees and tree spirits. I just really liked the aesthetic of those models, and they were fun to paint. But yeah, there's no, yeah, kind of like Ents, yeah. Actually, while I'm waiting for some things to dry, I can go grab some to show you. Let's see if I can find one real quick. So here's a couple that I painted. You can see some of them are really big, and those ones are like literally Ents. So yeah, here you go. Here's one that I painted. These guys were really fun because there's just a lot going on. I got to paint like the wood grain for like multiple different, like for like the bark. I got to paint like some of these magical runes that are on it. Get to paint the leaves. Generally, I like to paint things that are interesting and have lots of. It looks very delicate and easy. They are super easy to break. Like you can see, like I can push on this and it like flexes. Yeah, I've broken my fair share of these. But yeah, here's another one. A little bit smaller. And then here's like the smallest ones. These ones are like spirits that live and then they like take over like a small tree and use it as a body. Kind of cool. So yeah, those are my main, that's like my main army that I collect. And I chose it just purely because they look cool. Alright, the last step I'm going to do here is I'm going to take some, it's called Griff Charger Gray, and it's a contrast paint. It's a grayish blue. And I'm just going to take this and I'm going to dilute it and I'm going to add it to the blade. a lot of steel has like a bluish tint to it, and so adding this bluish gray kind of tends to have a pretty cool effect. And like how I was using the silver and going up, when you're applying darker colors, generally you pull down. And that's just because when you are applying paint, the pigments, you apply more pigment at the end of your brush stroke than at the beginning of your brush stroke. So with this darker color, I am applying more of it to the bottom of the blade than the top of the blade. Yeah, axe people and tree people do not mix very well, and although they are supposed to be generally friendly towards each other, there's a lot of lore where they are constantly fighting because axe people and tree people do not mix. I was going to apply another layer, but you can see it's like semi-dry. You super don't want to touch semi-dry paint. It'll end up tearing and leaving like weird textures on your model. So you have to let it dry. Sometimes you can kind of blow on it a little bit to help the drying process. And you can see in the shadows and stuff, there is a little bit of blue, which was the effect we're going for. I could add a little bit more blue because I want some more blue in there. So I'll just take some blue and add it to the Griff Charger Gray. Before I apply the second coat. And this should bring in some more blue. All right, and there you go. That's the I called it Storm-Kissed Axe. Because of all these shades that you apply, you can come back in with the highlight color just to hit, especially the edge of the blade. It tends to make it look sharp. So yeah, that's how you do like the Storm-Kissed halberd. And yeah, that's it. So I'm gonna end my stream here. Thanks for hanging out. And I do this every week, every Saturday at from 12 to 2 p.m. Central Time.